Hello, Zoom friends, and hello, people here. Thank you all so much for coming. Such a nice turnout. So a lot of you might be wondering, who am I? So a bit about me, pronoun she, her. I was born in Scotland, but raised in New Jersey. I like matcha lattes, corgis. This is my corgi, Zelda. She's 3 years old and very sassy. And I also like wandering aimlessly with nowhere to go, just like walking around. I don't like spicy food. I don't like waiting in line, and I don't like nails on chalkboard. My favorite artist is Yayoi Kusama. I just finished reading Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and I've been currently thinking about how art can reduce depression and loneliness and isolation in public spaces. What do I do? So I specialize in bright, bold, colorful abstract, whether that's through painting, ceramics, or public art, with the aim to spark joy. So here's a quick timeline of my life so far. Born in Glasgow in 1985. My family immigrated to Princeton, New Jersey in 1990, and that's where I grew up, so right next door to here. And I attended Hartford Art School in Connecticut from 2003 to 2007 with a major in graphic design, and I minored in photography and art history. And then shortly after, moved to New York City to begin my design career. And then I continued to do my fine art outside of that. So in 2015, I had my first New York City art show. In 2016, my first artist residency. And then I became a full-time artist about 6 years ago now. In 2022, I created my first mural that was my own design. And in 2024, I did this artist talk. So that's what's happening right now. So something I think artists often think about is, what does success look like for artists? And there's this impression of it's just this upward trajectory, right? You start here and you go that way. But if I've learned anything, it's a lot of this and a lot of going back and forth and weaving and little ups and downs. And yeah, it's not quite a straight upward arrow. So I'm going to talk about my artistic journey and some things I've learned. And we'll start with the early years. So raised in the 90s, so a lot of these things were my aesthetics and the things I was consuming. And it's funny to think about now how a lot of those patterns and colors and graphics even play into my artwork now as an adult. But this is my earliest work. Typical stuff, doing family drawings. This is my mom right here. You remember those. Yeah, family, always drawing the house. My grandmother lives in an apartment, so that's her apartment complex. This is my first artist statement, and it was about my dog. She likes to roll on the ground. She's funny. You know, like to draw animals. I also would draw airplanes a lot because we would go back and forth to Scotland to see family every year. But speaking of drawing animals, my mom is a fantastic artist in her own right. And growing up, we would draw horses together. And as a child, I would get really upset because I would be like, why is my horse not as good as your horse? Like, I want it to look like yours. And my mom always comforted me and said, your horse doesn't look like mine, but it's still a good horse. But this is sort of those early feelings of imposter syndrome. Has anybody experienced that here? We got one little hand here. Yeah, it's really normal to experience. It's that feeling that one's success is not deserved or not legitimate as a result of one's own efforts or skills. And they say probably about 70% of the population experiences it. And that for artists, it's even more because we're in a field where we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people. So some of the characteristics of that, you have self-doubt, you undervalue your contributions, you feel like a fraud, you might feel inadequate, denial of your competencies, your failure, and ultimately burnout from all these feelings. But what I learned from my mom is that you as an artist have something unique to offer that, you know, my horse doesn't look like the horse, but it was still mine, and that was unique, and that was something valuable. So really early on, having that support and learning that. So some tips for fighting imposter syndrome is to just know failure is okay. That's where a lot of learning happens, actually. And there's always going to be more opportunities. Celebrate your successes, because I do think we really focus on our failures and we don't celebrate our successes enough. So if you have something exciting, share it with a friend, share it with family, post it online. And if that all feels like too much, you know, print it out and put it up on your wall, put it on your fridge, just celebrate your success. And if both of those things feel like too much, trust in others. So I'm sure you maybe had an art teacher who's encouraged you, or maybe it was a parent, or maybe there was a juror who juried you into a show. So when people do that, it's because they believe in you. So even if you can't feel like you're believing in yourself, trust in the other people that do believe in you. So moving ahead, in high school, this is sort of the style of work that I was making. I was in math class and I was sat next to a kid that was a graffiti artist. And so I would really be interested in the lettering he was doing. And I would say, hey, can you show me how to do that? So he would start sort of teaching me stuff about type and about lettering. And I really got into it. And, you know, friends would say to me, hey, here's $5. Can you letter my name for me to hang in my locker? So I don't know if anyone's familiar with Conti's Pizza over in Princeton. That was my first job. So I worked at the register there, and so I was doing the takeout orders, and in between, I'm doing my drawing, and a gentleman came in to pick up his pizza, and he looked at it and he goes, you should be a graphic designer. And I went, what's that? And he's like, look it up, kid. And he walked out. And I went home that day and I said to my mom, Mom, I'm going to be a graphic designer. She went, great, you're going to college. You don't know what it is, but great, we're going for it. So I applied, but I didn't apply to like specific art schools because of that imposter syndrome feeling still. And I was never the art star in high school. Like there were those kids who were the art stars, and that wasn't me. I would draw all the time, but you know, I wasn't, the star of the art classes. So I felt a bit intimidated. And then I also thought, well, I don't even know what graphic design is. So what if I get into university and don't like it? So I looked at universities that had wide programs that had then a good art program in it. So I applied to one called Hartford Art School in Connecticut. And they wrote back and they said, we see potential, but we're going to need you to do 2 18 by 24 charcoal still life drawings. And I started crying because I had never drawn that large before. And I was like, I can't do this. And then my mom said, you're going to do it. So I did. And we set up a still life with 2 vases and some cloths in our home. And then the other one, I looked down at my hand and I drew it. And I got into art school. So in art school, I took all the foundations classes, tried a bunch of different mediums. So this was like drawing, so I had some cross hatching, photography, printmaking, sculpture, and then of course graphic design, what I was going for. So just trying all these different things, taking the opportunity to try as many different mediums as I could. What was pivotal for me was actually my first foundations drawing class. Day 1, we all walk in and we don't know each other at all. We're all kind of looking around the room, trying to size everybody up. Like, okay, who's got the skills here, who doesn't, right? The teacher takes the chair, puts it in the middle of the floor, and we're all at our easels in a circle around it. Everybody's at a different angle. And he says, 10 minutes, draw the chair. That was it. So we all start drawing. We don't know what anybody else is doing. We're just 10 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna make the best chair ever. 10 minutes are up. We're told, pin the drawings up to the wall. So we all go up, and it's a sea of beautifully rendered chairs right in the middle of the page. And then there's mine, where I drew a corner of it, and it was just a couple of lines. And the teacher said, who stands out here? And everybody pointed at mine. And he said, okay, first lesson's gonna be on composition. But the bigger realization to me was, maybe I'm an abstract artist. Maybe I just see things a bit differently. So this was another assignment where he put a paper bag and we had to draw it. And I just already was starting to sort of see things in shapes and simplify things and break them down. Then we were told to do a famous piece of art. And this is how I interpreted Botticelli's Birth of Venus. So just my approach was seeing shapes and abstracting it. Meanwhile, studying graphic design, studying type. And as I kept going through school, these things sort of started to combine. So I had those shapes. I had my signature mark making that was sort of this deconstructed type language I'd made up myself. And then as time progressed again, it just got more and more simple, more and more contrast, and sort of the figurative elements disappeared. So this brings me to lesson 2, which is to develop your own creative style. This is tricky, right? Because we're always taught to imitate when we're starting out, copy things, look at what other artists are doing and try to imitate that, try to recreate that. But I guess I challenged myself at the time to think, instead of doing what I think the professor wants me to do, try and think about it still through my own lens. Here's some other things I learned in art school. When in doubt, add contrast. A lot of the time, if something's not working visually, contrast helps. So you're thinking light and dark, big and small. It has to work on 2 levels. So something has to capture you from far away, and then when you get up close, it also has to have some interest. And then the third thing is making art is hard work. I think a lot of people think, since it's something that you get joy out of, that means it's not hard work in some way, but it is. It's really hard to make something out of nothing. And then to share it is actually a really brave thing to do. So I graduated, and shortly after, I moved to New York City. So my first job, this is the view. I don't know if you see it, Empire State Building. I was right on Broadway. And I worked as a graphic designer for a small ad agency. So we did real estate websites, and then my accounts were Bath and Body Works and Victoria's Secret. So I'm really sorry if any of you saw any flash banner ads of Victoria's Secret. That was probably me. But that was sort of my first foray into graphic design in the real world. And I got let go in the 2008 recession. But my boyfriend at the time, his sister worked for a handbag company called Coach, if anyone's familiar. And she said, well, we're looking for like a freelance designer to like come on and fill like a spot. So I went to Coach, and I worked there for 5 years, eventually getting to be an art director. So I think I'd mentioned earlier, I had minored in photography. So this sort of thing combined the graphic design major and the minor of photography. So I worked at Coach for 5 years, tennis school for 2, and then Kate Spade for 2 years as well. And it was a lot of on figure, model shoots, fashion, handbags, accessories, all of that. Meanwhile, I was still doing art. But I started to kind of move away from all that black and white contrast and started getting more into color. I was very, very fascinated with space. I think I had mentioned this to some of the members before, and they're like, yeah, we all go through that phase. So I was in that phase during this time. I was also looking at images from the Hubble Space Telescope, because there's actually a library of it online, and it's like open source. So if anyone wants to create art with it, you're welcome to do it. So I was just seeing how my marks would interact with those images. And then at the same time, still building on my own abstraction. So this is my interpretation of that same image in the full abstract. I also had my first art show in New York City. I did my first artist residency, and I did my first art fair. So working as an art director and doing all of these things, I was really burning the candle at both ends. So I would usually have an 8 a.m. call time for photo shoots. And I would be up at 5 a.m. painting to make sure I have work for these events. And then I started getting collectors, people following my practice. And I thought, if I'm going to try and do this, like, now's the time to try and be an artist full time. So lesson number 3, listen to the little voice inside, even when it's scary. So yeah, I've been an artist full time now, coming up on 6 years. And as much as I loved art directing, I'm really happy. I listened to that little voice inside. It's like, just try. And it's like, okay, we're going to do it for a year. Then next thing you know, a year is 2 years, and then you just keep building on that. I always get asked, like, how did you actually do it? So here's some tips for making that leap. First, have a list of collectors. So as I said, I was doing the shows, I was selling the work while working full time. Have projects already on the go. So when I left corporate, I went right into a project immediately, which I'll share with you, and have money saved up. I know it's not a fun thing to talk about, but it's true. And it also helps you focus on your art practice, because you're not worrying about, how am I going to pay that next bill? So I recommend at least 6 months, if not longer. So I'm a full-time artist now, and I needed a studio because I was working in either my kitchen or my living room floor. And at this point, the work had scaled up. I was starting to work larger and larger. So the second bedroom of my New York City apartment became the new studio. I was very official. So my first project was actually for an ice cream company. This is very serendipitous. I actually don't know how my work came across the desk of an art director at this ice cream company, but they said, "We love your work. We're looking for something for the branding." And I said, "Sure. I love ice cream. Art and ice cream, that's great." But it was still a little bit of a rounded out process, because they'd given me a different flavor, and I was still in art director mind. So when I gave it to them, I had it all mocked up on the packaging and all done up. And they wrote me back and they were like, "Isn't quite what we were thinking. And also the flavor we gave you, not going to launch. So we'll be in touch if anything." So I was kind of bummed out. I had a 6-week solo traveling trip to Japan. So I took off to Japan. 2 weeks into that trip, I get an email saying, "Guess what? We got a new flavor for you. And it's matcha. And can you send us something in like the next 2 days?" And I'm in Hiroshima. And I'm like, okay, we're going to go to an art supply store and find something. So yeah. So, I mean, lovely art supplies there. Yeah. So I went, I bought some nice watercolor paper, and I remember going and picking it up, and then I had a boat ride to Miyajima Island, So I get to the island, I check into like a ryokan, and I'm sat like in my robe, like after having gone in the onsen, and I'm doing this watercolor of matcha while drinking matcha. It couldn't be more perfect. Um, and then the next day, I hike up a mountain that was on that island, get the boat back over, and then the bullet train to Fukuoka. And I walk into my hostel and I'm folding my watercolor pad with my drawing, and I go, my painting, and I say, do you guys have a scanner? And they're like, yeah. So what I scanned in that little hostel in Fukuoka is what ended up on this ice cream packaging. So it was a bit of a journey, but we made it there, and that was sort of my first client as an artist, not as an art director. In terms of my work at that time, this is where I had gone as well. Still that signature mark making, and the paper I was actually working on was what we used for the backdrop of photo shoots. And I noticed we would do these photo shoots with handbags when I was working for Kate Spade, and they would throw the paper out after, and I'd be like taking it and putting it in my portfolio and walking off with it. So I'm like, all you did is put a handbag on it. Why are you throwing this out? It's really nice, good paper. I don't know if anyone's worked with it, color aid paper. Yeah, so that's what it was, just large sheets of color aid. This is it. This is me for scale. You can see the size of them. But based on this body of work, I got my first solo show in New York at a gallery called Pleady's Gallery. And I knew that I had this work, but I needed something to go on the other walls. So I took it upon myself to start a 100-day project. Has anyone done the 100-day project? Okay, we got a nod over here. So yeah, you basically do one thing every day for 100 days straight. And I thought, yeah, okay, I can do that, no problem. I've always been wanting to do one, and now I have the time to do it, and I'm going to be doing it for this show. It's going to be great. I started off every morning, you know, got my matcha, sat down, did a drawing, so excited. Probably at about day 20, you know, yeah, it's like noon. Oh, I have to do this thing. Okay, fine, I'll do it. Day 40. How am I going to make something different from the last 40 days? Day 60. Oh my gosh, it's 11:30 p.m. at night, and I got a half hour to make a drawing to make it this day. But I did it even when I didn't want to do it. And that brings me to lesson number 4. Motivation and discipline, that is where you will hit your goals. So why? Why is that? You know, once again, motivation is wavering. It's really that initial spark that gets you to go, yes, I'm excited. I'm going to do this thing. It doesn't last. Discipline at the same time, that's the steady, that's the, I don't feel like going into the studio today, but you go into the studio. Because for me, no one else is going to do that for me. I don't have a manager anymore. I don't have someone telling me you need to get in and make art. So I found that the combination of motivation and discipline, that's the happy medium there. So some tips for staying disciplined. Start small. Don't do a 100-day project. You know, it's really tempting to do a big shift because that's the motivation, right? Ooh, it's so exciting to do this sort of thing. But maybe do it one drawing a week, a month, something that you know that you can commit to. And then be consistent. So maybe picking a time that works with your routine and just making it easy for yourself. I like that discipline is a muscle that needs to be trained. And then what I said before, do it anyway. You know, I'm really grateful and fortunate that I'm, you know, living my dream of being a full-time artist. but I don't make masterpieces when I walk into the studio, like consistently. It's just still showing up and doing it anyway, even when you don't feel like it. Um, yeah, motivation gets you going, but discipline keeps you growing. So where I'm at now. So ceramics came in because of my mother, again. I was on an artist residency at the Princeton Arts Council. And my mother would come in and visit, and she'd always go, "I really want to take a ceramics class." So ended up getting her a gift card to try it out, and just loved it, caught on. Did not have enough firing cards for how many things this woman was making, which slowly then progressed into her going to a studio in Flemington. What was it again? Kissimmee River Pottery in Flemington, where there were no firing cards. You can fire whatever can fit into the kiln. And so she's doing this. I'm doing my painting. And one day she goes, "Do you want to glaze some of my forms?" I've been waiting for you to ask. So we worked on probably 10 things over like a 1 year period. And then I thought, well, I'll put them on my website and send it out to my newsletter if anyone's interested. And they sold out in the first hour. And then I was like, oh, we got something here. So I posted about it on my social media, and people were furious because they were like, "I didn't know about this." I'm like, "Join the newsletter. That's the insider track." But then we knew we had something, and we enjoyed collaborating. My mom makes the forms, I glaze. I don't dictate what she makes. She doesn't tell me how to glaze. It's a good collaboration in that way. And it's nice for me also, since she makes these unique one-off things, I get to react to whatever form she gives me. But yeah, the next shop launch we did, I think 30 things sold out. Did another one, 40 things sold out. And then we were like, all right, I guess we're getting a kiln. So now there's a Stut kiln in the basement of my mother's house and a wheel, and it's a whole home operation. But, we sell our work on my website as well as like at art fairs and whoever will have us. Public art. That's something else I also got into a bit later. And this was a result of the pandemic, actually. So when 2020 hit, all my art shows, art fairs, those selling opportunities, anywhere to even showcase my work, poof, disappeared, gone overnight. And I was paying attention to what were other artists doing at this time, and I noticed a lot of people were going to the street as a way of still showcasing their work. So once again, I saw the Princeton Arts Council. They were doing murals on Spring Street in downtown. And I said, can I just volunteer to help? I am always been interested to do a mural, and I don't know anything about it. So can I just volunteer, see how it's done? And they're like, yeah, of course. More volunteers, the better, especially people that would have an art background. Great, we'll take you, So this was the first one I helped on. And this was the next one. It's at the shopping center in Princeton. And helping on these two murals, really learned a lot. And then the other fortunate thing was, since I was like their volunteer, they said to me, hey, we've received an artist grant to do this space on Spring Street. Would you like to do a mural there, something of your own work? And I was like, yeah, I would love to. So this is what I made. And this is what I call my super bloom motif. You can see it in some of my paintings here, and it kind of became a signature style of mine. But they had said, I was going to be like the spring mural, and I had thought, oh, I want to do like something reminiscent of a flower field. So this is what I had come up with. since that first one, I've done 11 public art projects. So this one is in Asbury Park. So I worked with the township on that. And then this one is a commercial business, and it's like a videographer who I had worked with at Coach, and he owns his own video studio. And he was like, "I always remember you drawing in meetings in the side of notebooks. Do you still do those, Mark?" Yes. Would you come draw on my building? Yes. Also, public art isn't always drawing on walls. So I did a piano project. I painted a rain barrel and a bench. So public art is more than just walls. There's plenty of things you can paint almost anything. And this is my most recent. So I just finished this in December. It was my largest mural yet. So it was two sides of the building, about 100 feet of mural space. And this is up in Bloomfield. It's a recreation building, so they're revitalizing a park there. And they had asked if I would be, well, I had applied actually. And then I had used the town's motto, which is our unity makes our community on the one side. And then on the other side, I did a stronger together message because there's a Stay Strong mural in town that's very well known. So I just wanted to riff off of that. And then the thing that ties the two sides together, the Black-Eyed Susans, because just last year they named that as the official town flower. But the last thing is it's just never too late. My mom is a ceramicist in her retirement, selling it at art fairs and all sorts of stuff. I'm making murals. You know, I guess I did the first one, I was 35. It's not a great age to start doing public art and getting up on scaffolding, but you know, I love doing it. And when there's a will, there's a way. It's just never too late. So it just brings me back to that, what does success look like? So for me, it just wasn't, oh yeah, I'm doing these drawings and that's what I'm doing. It was a lot of different things I got into, but just continuing to build on myself as an artist and find ways to keep making my art. So whether that is through public art or through a collaboration or through residencies like this. So the tips for success: you have something unique to offer, develop your own creative style, listen to the little voice inside, motivation and discipline are goals, and it's never too late. Thanks. Questions, thoughts? For the most part, yeah. So when I'm applying for projects, which typically are with townships, they do what's called an RFP. So it's a request for proposal. Sometimes you get something called an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications. So they'll ask for your qualifications. You maybe submit previous work and your artist statement and things like that. And then they would push you through to a proposal. But some places just do an RFP. So this is an advantage for me having worked as an art director and graphic designer. I will mock up everything in Photoshop. I'll do a sketch and mock it up on the wall so they can kind of envision what it would look like. And I do get a lot of feedback from like these townships saying like, usually we maybe get a drawing on a napkin from artists of a sketch. So I just have an advantage in that regard. But yeah, no, for most murals, everything has to be planned out. The one that I did on my friend's commercial building, I freehanded all of that. So there was an idea that we wanted to use metallic marker, but there wasn't like a plan per se, a sketch. Yeah. I use outdoor exterior house paint. So for me, it works for what I do. It's very hard to blend. So if you're somebody that's into like blending, usually if you're doing a mural with house paint, you would have to get a little bit more graphic, but specifically for what I do, since my work's very graphic at work, but Benjamin Moore, Sherman Williams, I do seal it. So I'll prime a wall first, and then I'll use exterior house paint and depending on the condition of the wall, that can vary. I tend to use a matte finish. And then after it's all cured in, usually I'll give it a few days to a week to cure. I use something called Vandal Guard, and that seals it in. It actually gives it a bit of a sheen as well after, but supposedly, if somebody were to vandalize it, you could power wash it off without ruining the mural. I don't know if that's true. I'm not sure I entirely believe that. I haven't had to test the theory yet, thankfully. But what I do know is it helps protect it from the elements. So I got the primer, and then exterior house paint already has like that primer in it, and then the Vandal Guard is yet sealing.
What clay body are you using?
Yeah, well, I guess something else to note, about the ceramics is, since we know we go that bright and colorful angle, we're using something lighter color, because we had tried red clay and things like that, it just didn't taste the same. And then something else to note about it is we'll use an underglaze for the color, and then we use something that's called designer liner glaze to do the marks on top, and that's how you kind of get that crispy effect. Because if you use an underglaze and an underglaze, it usually bleeds a lot. We found this out through a lot of trial and error. But that's what we use. So designer liner, you can find it on Amazon. You just look up designer liner glaze and it will come up.
How do you know how much to draw?
That is the question, isn't it? Oh yeah, sure. How do I know what to price my work at? I think that's, exactly. Yeah, everyone's kind of like, no. Well, there's a lot of ways that you could go about it, right? There's always giving yourself an hourly rate, but for me, I would just price myself out of being able to sell anything. You always have to take your materials into consideration, things like that, and that kind of becomes a baseline. And I don't know, maybe it's trite, but for me, it's what am I comfortable selling it at? What would I not be mad to part with it at? Because definitely early on, I would part with things and I would kind of have that feeling of, I don't really feel great about that, but I'm doing it anyway. So I kind of learned to just ask for what I felt, and it's the right piece, finding the right person at the right time, and context too. So for me, personally, with my work, I had done like an outdoor craft fair, and people were just kind of like, your work doesn't seem to like fit here. Like I got that feedback from people coming by. But then when I did an art fair, and it's sort of like an indoor white wall situation, people were like, the context fits for it, So it's an interesting thing. My mother and I, our ceramics sell at art fairs. Some, like one of those vases, like $180 it would go for. Whereas if I tried to do that at a craft fair, people would laugh at me. So it's really, I would say context has a lot to do with it, and just finding people that really understand and value your work. Did that answer? I don't even know if that answered. It's trial and error. It's a lot of trial and error, Any other? Yeah, well, so my trip to Japan, definitely, like I said, Yayoi Kusama is my favorite artist, and seeing so much of her work, sort of seeing the way she patterned things, I was like, oh my gosh, kindred spirit, I think there's definitely like a Keith Haring quality to my mark making and my line work. Of course, his is more illustrative, but there's something definitely to the line work. I would probably say those two are my biggest influences.
I know you said I think the yellow latitude.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think there's any shame in being inspired by people too. Yeah, I think, and I think it's interesting too how, for me, when I was in high school and started doing my mark making, I mean, I didn't know who Keith Haring was. But then when I found out, once again, it's like kindred spirit, and then, it kind of becomes that cyclical thing of now I'm being inspired back by that. Like you kind of get attracted to people that are like, oh, that's similar to mine. Right, yeah, no pumpkins. I also would say, like, Mark Roscoe definitely as well, like sort of just that use and play with color inspires me a lot. I really like seeing his work in person. And then now, especially doing public art, just that feeling of being like consumed by something that large. Oh, the letterer from high school? I haven't, you know? Jose, where are you? Are you on Zoom? Find me. Yeah, like, do I give myself, do I give myself, working hours now? Do I do a 9 to 5? No. I work all the time. But I mean, it's also a thing too where, I let the badness of creativity drive me. So if I'm really into painting and working on something, I will devote myself to that. And then, the tank will be empty for a couple of weeks and then I do nothing. And you kind of, it's cyclical. Yeah. And also for me, I would say probably the thing I work with most are deadlines, which is similar to when I worked in corporate. So I know I have an art fair that I do in Brooklyn twice a year. It's in May and November. So I know leading up to it, I have those 2 dates and I know I have this much wall space and I need to get work done for that. So I've kind of gotten into a system of knowing to make stuff for those. And then lots of random stuff comes up. There's application seasons for things, specifically outdoor murals. So your season's really like April to October. And, I did this one in December. I don't recommend it. I really don't. Because house paint cures at 40 degrees. If you're below 40 degrees, it will not cure. I found that out. And what I ended up doing was I went to Home Depot and I bought 100 yards of plastic tarp, and my assistant Chris nailed it across the entire top here. And the heat from the sun got us those few degrees warmer where the paint started to cure. But there was definitely a minute there where I was like, I might have to back out of this contract or be like, can we do this in the spring, guys? But yeah, so schedule. Like I know that I'm going to have seasons for things and there's going to be application times for things. And I try to just work within that. And then in regards to the ceramics, we know you have Valentine's Day, you have Mother's Day, you have holiday. So we always do a big holiday shop and we try to do as much as we can and a push for that. And so we'll have our vases and things like that, but then we'll have like maybe earrings and ornaments, some more like lower price point, giftable, accessible things. So yeah, it's not so much like a Monday through Friday, I work these hours. It's okay, I know I have this deadline, so I'm gonna work as many hours as it takes to hit that deadline. Yes.
So how many pieces are?
It's a great question. It depends on the year too, because it can fluctuate.
Right, you were saying never.
No, it's not. It's definitely not. And especially with the art fairs too, you can kind of notice where like, the economy is not doing great, so sales might be soft. But then, you pick up a few more murals and it all comes out in the wash. So for me, just having that diversified way of getting that income has helped a lot, and not solely just trying to sell paintings. But yeah, the ceramics, those tend to just kind of always do well. And then thankfully the mural projects are well paying, and that helps. And then the other thing, I didn't talk about this at all, I'll do influencer content on like Instagram and things like that. So that also pays pretty well when you get those. Yeah, yeah, basically doing an advertisement, and then, whatever company I work with, they'll get usage rights, and We'll have like, maybe it will be like, 4 Instagram posts for $6,000. And then they get to also promote those images on their platforms and stuff, and they get the usage of the images for a year, 2 years globally. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going into the recesses of my brain right now, because a lot of it was pretty serendipitous. Like I said, with the ice cream project, for instance, like I never contacted anybody about that. My work just happened to come across someone's desk. I'm pretty sure it was another art director I'd worked with that suggested me, because when I kind of looked at the contacts, I was like, oh, they know each other. But then another thing I do is, so I'll do advertisement for a particular medication I take. So the pharmaceutical industry found me because I was already sharing online about my journey with migraine. So I was just openly sharing about that. I wasn't seeking that out. And then they had somebody on their team looking through the hashtag for migraine and saw I had been talking about it. And they said, hey, we got this medication, would you try it out? And, whatever. And then I'm like, that's wild to me. I would not try a medication just to advertise it. But the medication they contacted me about is actually what I took. And it was actually effectively working for me after a lot of things didn't. So it just kind of lined up that it worked out. Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's an aspect to like going on their website too and seeing if there is a contact person, you can share it with them. Like I know, for instance, I frame a lot of my work using Frame It Easy. And I saw they had like an influencer thing on their page. And I just said, hey, I use your product. Do you want to send me some frames? I'm happy to, push that out. And yeah, I guess I've just had a bit of luck in that regard that I'm just really obnoxiously online. So when do I know the piece is finished? I think for me, once again, going back to coming from a graphic design background, I find even my way of painting is very system based. So I know I have a background color and then I'll have the bloom. I know there'll be, dots in certain areas, there'll be mark making in certain areas. And then I know I'll do some line layers on top, what I call line blooms, some of the bubble type marks. And I know once I've hit all of those items, that's it. I can't add anything else to it. But, things kind of get added and subtracted all the time. So it's really a gut feeling, I would say, a lot of the time. But I guess I just made it a bit easy for myself that I'm like, okay, I have my design system in my head of how I'm going to execute this. But when I start a new body of work, is this done? Is this not done? You cry, you yell, you scream, you add to it, you've added too much, you paint over it. I'm notorious for painting over things too. I really, if I'm like, I'm just not feeling this, I mean, I'll do something like the dot on the one. Like I've spent hours doing something like this and then painted over it and done a completely different color because I was like, I woke up the next morning and went, no, and just go over it. So yeah. And I guess I didn't mention this either, that a lot of my work is improvised as well. So I don't, like, for all of these works, I did not have a sketch ahead of time. I just sat down, drew a composition, and just started blocking things in. And a lot of the time I'll be like, oh, I'm going to move an element and things like that. I think ironically, the thing I did have 2 sketches for, these are the works in progress that I've just started here on this residency. And I think like day 1, I like sat in the lobby and did a sketch for one of them, which I never do. But I did that because I'm on a residency and you do stuff that you wouldn't normally do, right? But yeah, when do you know a work is done? Anyone else know the answer? We'll start here and we'll work over. the discipline, yeah, when you're an abstract artist, and it's so emotion-based, right? And that comes and goes, am I getting?
It won't even stop. Because, sometimes not every day we put this up.
Yeah,
Sometimes you are blind when like school.
yeah,
So at that time, what do you do? Just like,
yeah, a lot of the time sketch work is like sketchbooking is really good for that because it's less intimidating than the canvas or like a piece of paper. You're just kind of able to stream of consciousness stuff. I mean, specifically for me, I do very neurotic little marks, like meticulous things. So I'll fill pages upon pages with that. Like if I'm like, I'm not sure about painting today, I'll just do a bunch of those little marks over and over and over. And it's just, yeah, that practice of making something. I mean, you have to make a ton of bad art to make anything decent. Yeah. So, I mean, go into the studio and make a bunch of crap. Yeah, it's like, it just, do you ever look up prompts at all? Like, maybe look at a photograph of somewhere you visited. I do that sometimes. I'll like go back into memories and look at it. I also will pull out, like I said, I love painting over things. So I'll like go into my closet and pull out a painting that I was like, oh, this isn't finished. I didn't know how to feel about it, and then I'll just mess around with it. Exactly, because then sometimes, like, I also really like going and pulling out even old drawings. I paint primarily now, but sometimes I'll go into an old drawing and just add something to it. Because sometimes when you're like, I can't have an initial thought to spark something new, sometimes revisiting old stuff helps do that. So whether it's a memory in a photo or an old piece, I don't know. We're working our way along.
I got a very strong sense of fabric as I look at them.
No, I haven't. I get asked this quite a bit. And it's another thing I'll say also to Zoom. If anyone out there works in textiles and thinks that you can help me, I'm happy to collaborate with you.
I work with Windsor into fabric as well, but
Yeah.
I guess it's feeling that it's almost like cut out and apply, although you're painting.
Yeah. And I definitely, I've even looked, yeah, I think you guys probably know about those websites like Society 6 or Sweatbooks and stuff where you can get stuff printed on it. I haven't had much success with it. But it's something I have thought about, and I'm just looking for the right collaborator. Yeah. Oh gosh. I favor a round brush, and as opposed to a flat end brush, I like the round ones. And I use really cheap ones from Blick or Michael, whatever the cheapest that comes in a pack with a bunch of different sizes, and I just destroy them. And the size I'll like switch up depending maybe on like the size of whatever it is I'm working on. So I don't have like a go-to brush. Actually, I'm not like, oh, this is my size 6, whatever. But in terms of like the dot, I will just get it like a dollop of paint on any brush and just kind of dip it onto the canvas over and over. Acrylic, and I'll use I prefer Liquitex or Golden. Yeah. Any other questions? No. No. It's just paint. It's a crap kind of paint. Yeah. And I'm also somebody, I work right out of the tube. I'm not much of a palette artist. Yeah, so I load it on there and I'll maybe do a background and then I'll like work in a lighter one. Oh, look, it's my face. That's what everyone wants to see. Okay, hi Zoom. But yeah, I recently did buy some acrylic medium though to experiment because then I can extend my paint. I'm using so much paint. Any questions? Yeah, so what was the impact of going to art school? I think for me, it was really having a space to experiment and validate my individuality as an artist. And also get skills. So yeah, exactly. Yeah, having a group of people to criticize your work constantly. So by the time I was going into corporate meetings and showing my idea, my creative director said, this looks like J.C. Penney, not Coach. You know, I had a bit of a backbone to me. You know, in community, I think that was a big part of it. I'm still in touch with a ton of people I went to art school with, and being an artist can be a solitary practice. So just having other people to bounce your ideas and work off of is important. Otherwise, you get into that silo. How do I expect this residency to impact my art? It's a good question. I think with a lot of residencies I've done in the past, I've gone in with a very specific goal, whether it's to make a certain amount of pieces or maybe a particular project. And I honestly haven't given myself that for this one. I'm very fortunate that the center here is not saying, oh, you're having an exhibit at the end of this and you have to fill a room with work. You know, they're giving me studio space and I'm able to experiment. So time will tell. Hopefully something good will come out of it. I mean, I'm continuing the body of work that I've been doing, my Super Bloom series. So I hope to make more of that. And then, yeah, acrylic medium, we just talked about, maybe do some experimenting with that and different materials. Any other questions? Was there anything in the chat? Okay.
Yeah, anybody else?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you everyone so much, really, for coming. It really means a lot. Thank you. No. These are Kate Spade. We do make ceramic earrings though. I should have wore them. Bye, Zoom friends. Thank you, David.